some people might say, I like to have my AI give me ideas or help me world build or what have you. And for me personally, I would never do that. I just don't want it to be part of anything I do because I've enjoyed all those things on my own. And I feel like it's my creativity that I'm improving when I'm working on things like that.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vatney, and today I am sitting with Dr. Philip Chase, returning guest and author of the Adan trilogy. Welcome back to the show, Philip.
Thank you, Michael. It's once again a pleasure to be here chatting with you.
Of course. I really appreciate you being here. I had to dress the part this time. I was just inspired by your nice sharp cut look, so I had to do the same.
Yeah. It's trademarked. The tweed is officially trademarked, so yeah.
I unfortunately am not wearing tweed, but I'll see if I can find some in my closet.
That's okay.
I think I have a tweed jacket, actually.
We might start something if we wear the tweed, you know. So.
I'm okay with this. If we're ever at the same con, we got to coordinate. That's all I'm saying.
That would be good.
Excellent. So last week we had you on. We mostly just kind of shot the shit, talked about yourself and your journey and how you got to where you are today. But today we actually have a subject. We wanted to talk about AI in the modern era of trying to be creative. And the first question that I wanted to ask is usually the first question I always ask on these second interviews is, why did you want to talk about this subject?
Yeah, well, it is a timely subject. It's come up a lot in a lot of places. And I think a lot of people are still figuring out how they feel about AI as it evolves and becomes more sophisticated and is better at imitating human art. And it's not just writing, of course. We're talking about music. We're talking about art. We're talking about literature and various creative realms. And just from the beginning, I want to make clear, I am not against AI, period. I think there are many realms where AI is incredibly helpful, and maybe we'll see some really wonderful medical breakthroughs, for example. So there are fields where clearly AI is going to be a very valuable tool, and it is just that. It's a tool. And every tool could be used for good or ill. Unfortunately, I do feel that in a lot of the creative realms that the way AI has been used and the way that some of the creators of the LLMs particularly have gone about creating their AI has been dishonest and harmful. And the way that people are using it also has been harmful. I see this as an educator as well. So that colors my thinking on this. As an educator, I'm supposed to be teaching people how to think and how to write. And these are things that are really under threat right now because there are multiple studies out there now that have shown that people who lean a lot on AI to do those things for them actually end up with weaker critical thinking skills. So it makes sense, right? I think if you don't use those functions, you're leaning on something else to do that for you, you're not going to develop those skills. So that is a concern I have. But as from the writer perspective, in terms of creative writing, I feel very strongly that these are realms where it is better for humanity for us to create these things ourselves because there's a lot of value in the process of writing, in the process of art. We need these things. You're a writer, so you understand this. You know what you get out of writing in and of itself is a process, and you feel cleansed, you feel renewed, you feel invigorated, you feel like you're alive when you're writing. If you have an AI do that, you're missing all of that. You're not going to go through that. You're not going to experience that. So it's not just about the product, it's about the process. That's something I want to emphasize. I'll come back to it in our discussion.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like what you're saying with the critical thinking, it's one of those things that if you don't use it, you lose it. It's just like exercise with the body. If you don't use your muscles, they atrophy. If you don't use your brain, it also atrophies.
That's right. And if I go to a gym with the goal of getting bigger muscles and being fit, but I have a robot do all the weightlifting for me, I'm not really going to benefit much from that, am I? I can't say to people, I went to the gym and I bench pressed 500 pounds. Well, actually, it was a robot that did that. And I'm not going to get bigger pecs from having a robot.
Yeah.
And you're not going to become a writer by having an AI do your writing for you. So, yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And you are also right again. Like, there are a lot of useful places for AI. I was saying offline, I'm a software engineer. I use AI in my work for writing code and creating features and testing things. It is a fantastic tool for consuming research data and finding patterns to do like cancer research and all these other things. Amazing places for AI. Not in the art space, not in the, I'm trying to exercise my brain, exercise my creativity. You've spoken about solidarity with audiobook narrators against AI replacements. How does this extend to AI's role in writing itself? And what steps can writers take to protect their craft?
Yeah, so I do feel very strongly that if I'm going to be against AI replacing writers, I really ought to be in solidarity with my artist friends, with my audiobook narrator friends. These are also creative realms. An audiobook narrator is an artist. When an audiobook narrator records a story, it's an interpretation. It's a performance. It's like going to a play and watching a drama. I would never want an AI to replace all that. So I feel very strongly that if we are supportive of human creativity, we can't be hypocritical and say, well, AI is okay if for art, but no, not for writers, or, for it's okay for audiobooks, but not for my writing. I don't want to be replaced by AI, but I'm willing to use Amazon's, cheapo AI thing in order to get my audiobooks out there. So, and look, I understand these things are expensive. I know very well now that paying a narrator and getting the sound engineering done and everything else, it's very expensive to put out an audiobook. I get it. But there are cheaper alternatives as well. Not as cheap as using an AI, but I think you'll find that in the long run, if you're able to produce an audiobook with human creativity, maybe include your own. You may want to take a shot at it yourself even. But if you're able to do that in the long run, it's going to pay off better for you. Because I know a lot of people are not going to be interested in AI narration. They're just not. A lot of people are turned off by AI replacing human creativity, and they don't want to support that. So they won't consume AI art or AI music or AI writing, and I think that should extend to audiobook narration. So this is, again, there's something vital here at stake. And I think that we need these creative things in order to be fully human. It's a fundamental part of what we are. We are a creative creature. Our creativity is what distinguishes us in many ways from other creatures. So you don't want to throw that away, because if you do, I think you're going to have a lot. This is the other thing about overusing AI. Not only does it reduce your ability to think critically, but a lot of people who are using it a lot are very depressed. And because they're using AI, it's like eating gummy bears for dinner instead of eating good food. And right? They're using AI to replace their social interactions. They're using it to replace things, their creativity. And we need to be challenged. We need that. We need to be challenged. We need to work at stuff in order to feel fulfilled. That's how we're rigged, like it or not. So this laziness of having the AI do it all for me, you're not going to feel one bit of fulfillment. But guess what, Michael? You worked your butt off for years on that book. You're going to feel an incredible sense of fulfillment when people read that book. If I put out an AI book that it spat out after I put in a prompt and I put it out there, I feel no pride in that. I feel no fulfillment in that whatsoever. And we need that. We need to work at things. We need to be creative. So I feel that if AI is in any way, shape, or form a threat to human creativity, then I'm against it.
That makes a lot of sense. I wholly agree with what you're saying about people need resistance. Like, you need something to push against to create that accomplishment. I never thought of that in terms of AI, though, that AI just really takes that away from you. It just takes away the struggle of finding the answer or creating the piece. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I think so. And there's another part of it too, editors. Okay. Working with an editor was one of the most important things I did in my writing process. There was a lot of magic that happened there. There was a lot of growth that happened there for me as a writer. It was a really important part of that process. So don't rip yourself off by letting an AI edit your work, because you'll miss a huge part of that process. Editing, tweaking, all that makes you a better writer too, right? So yeah, it's about, again, the process, not just the product. And the process is where a lot of the importance lies.
It's kind of in opposition to the ends justify the means. Like the means matter. How we get there matters. We need this process. We need this struggle.
Yep, exactly. And I know, okay, so there are counter arguments here. There is the
let's talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, it's only fair, I think, that we acknowledge that.
I agree.
In part, I'm very sympathetic to people who say, look, I cannot afford an artist to do a cover for my book. I'm sorry, I can't. There are alternatives out there.
Yes.
What is it called? Canva, I think. There
is Canva. Is a software that you can use. There's also there is a website. I cannot remember it off the top of my head, but you can get a cover
in the description.
I'll find it and I'll put it in the description. But you can get a book cover for less than $100 through this site, and it's not custom art. What it is you work with an individual who uses like stock photos and effects to create the art for your cover piece. Like I said, it's not a custom drawing or anything like that, but it will be unique to your novel, and it's less than $100, which is an excellent alternative.
Yep. It's not, I mean, and you'll feel better about it, I think. Yeah. And you also will have plenty, again, readers who will say, that's an AI cover, I'm not touching that book.
Yeah. Because there is a very strong aversion in the community against it.
Yeah. And I think there's some logic to that, where someone says, that's an AI cover, so can I really trust that this writer wouldn't use AI in their writing, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of being tainted, I guess, in a way. The perception.
Yeah, that's the dangerous thing is, so nobody really wants to read an AI story. I'm sure there is a group of people that would be okay with it, but the vast majority, especially the very vocal majority of people, say they do not want to read AI written books. So then if you do use AI for your narration, or you do use AI for your cover, that does beg the question for a lot of people, where did you draw the line?
Right. Yeah. So I think
that's a difficult answer.
Yeah. And the wiser course is to just avoid it altogether. And you'll enjoy that creative process. And you'll enjoy, in our other discussion, I mentioned how fulfilling it was for me to work with other creative people. Those are important relationships as well that you form as a writer. This is not an activity you do in isolation. So when you work with a map maker, when you work with a cover designer, when you work with an artist, when you work with an audiobook narrator, they become friends. They become creative partners. These are really important, and if you're using AI again, you're missing out on all that stuff. And there are usually cheaper alternatives to using AI. There are. And like with the covers, that should really be a no-brainer. I think if you can't afford to commission someone, then you've got alternatives to AI that are still pretty affordable. I think audiobook narration. That's a bit more difficult, right? That's hard. A lot of people cannot afford. It is expensive. So you're talking about somebody who's pretty decent at audiobook narration. Usually you're talking about around $200 per finished hour. So if it takes 20 hours to when it's all said and done, you can do the math. That's $4,000 you're forking over. And that's not a really established, famous narrator by any means, right? But you can find some even cheaper, and you can also learn to do it yourself, right? There are plenty of our fellow writers out there who all narrate their own books. So that is an alternative. And some will do it. You'll find some, at least when I started to look into it, there were people who were approaching me who were saying, I will do it for $100 per finished hour. So, there are alternatives out there. That said, I do understand it's not a cheap, easy thing to afford, but long term, you may find it pays off because more people will say, oh, that's a human narrator, I'll give that a shot, as opposed to, AI, no thanks. You're going to have fewer sales that way, I suspect. But yeah.
For the most part, the market is speaking against AI in the art space, especially in books and cover art and such. Do you think it's ever going to get to a point where there will not be a pervasive, I don't want to say attack, but AI trying to get into the creative space? Do you think we'll ever hit that point where it will stop doing that? Or is this a battle for the long haul?
I don't think people are going to give up on this. In other words, people who insist that there should be human creativity are doing that for good reasons. They understand the importance of keeping that in our lives. Yes, there will be some people who say, I don't care as long as I'm entertained, right? If it's AI or if it's cheaper, I'll go that route. There will be people like that too, I'm sure. But I think there will always be a market for human created stories and art and music and whatnot, because again, there's a certain, at least percentage of the population that understands how important that is for our humanity. And you can always, I don't know. I mean, I obviously don't know exactly how AI is going to develop. It's obviously better than it used to be in some ways at imitating human writing. From my perspective as an educator, I've noticed how AI has gotten worse in some ways because AI basically, they stole, when they made some of these LLMs, they allegedly stole from authors, but they also stole a lot of stuff off the internet. They just, there's a lot of sludge that went into the creation of these AIs. And now that AIs have been spewing out their sludge, the AIs that are learning from the sludge are now learning from AI sludge, right? So it's compounding, in a way, it's compounding the sludge to a point where I have in the past seen students submit essays that were clearly not written by the students, were written by, Chat GPT or whatever. And there are all these hallucinations, they call them, in the writing, where the Chat GPT, so the student put in my prompt to analyze a short story or whatever, and then the student just took the paper and handed it to me and said, here's my essay. But the Chat GPT made up characters who are not even in the story. Will make up quotes from sources that don't exist. Will just, in other words, the AI is really good at bullshitting, is what it does. That's hallucinations are essentially bullshitting. That's it. So it makes me think: is this some kind of death spiral for these LLMs where they're getting their own sludge and recycling it and spewing it out? I don't know. And will they be able to avoid that sort of thing in the future? Maybe they'll smarten up. I think that they are better at imitating a certain writer's style than they used to be. A few years ago, I did a video with my friend AP Canavan where we just, out of curiosity, this is when it was just starting to become more popular. And we wanted to see if ChatGPT could imitate Steven Erikson's writing. So Malazan author. And it wasn't even close. It was laughable. It was awful. It was terrible. But what it spat out was very generic fantasy writing that was clearly not Steven Erikson, who is a very highly original writer. But is it at a point now where ChatGPT or some other LLM could imitate Steven Erikson? I don't know. Maybe it's a little more convincing now than it used to be 2 or 3 years ago. But for me, it doesn't matter. I will never want to read anything written by an AI because I believe in the extreme importance of human creativity.
MLMs that exist out there right now, like you're saying, they learned on the internet everything that exists out there, including everybody's books, which sucks. But it also
violating copyright and all of that.
yeah, absolutely ridiculous and infuriating. I don't even know what to do about that. But it also ingested all of the really bad things written on the internet, the poorly written things. So you kind of get pumped out of it, this middle ground, this very average of everything that exists. So it's not going to be great. So it's like, even if you make an AI book right now, it's not going to be a great book. It's not going to be a bestseller. Like, you're not going to come out with something quality. So you're really just beating yourself up working at this thing. Yeah, you're taking a lot of shortcuts, but you're taking a lot of shortcuts to get an okay product at best, which is really frustrating. That is tempting. But the accessibility, I think, is a big reason why it is there, and because of how readily available it is, like you're saying, especially with the narration and the cover art. People are just trying to find a way to make their dreams come true, but they're also compromising themselves to do so.
And I think they're missing the point to some degree, that if I have some AI, I put in a prompt and have an AI spit out a drawing, can I call myself an artist then? I don't think so. I haven't done the hard work of learning how to create art. It would be like, going to a bakery and buying a cake and giving it to someone and said, here, I made this cake. I baked this cake for you, right? No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You bought the cake, okay? You could have given the baker some instructions. Here, I want you to write this on the cake or whatever. But you didn't bake that cake. You didn't make that cake. In a similar way, I'm not an artist just because I tell an AI to make a piece of art. And I would never claim to be. But you're also missing the point. Again, it's product versus process. There's a lot of value in the process of working over years to make myself an artist. The people who are artists they're not privileged. They worked to get there, right? It's not about privilege. These people, okay, there is some privilege perhaps involved because yes, to afford art school, whatever, what have you, that's a factor for sure. But they also worked at it. So to me, you can't. It's a matter of the value of the art, yes, but it's also, again, that process and the value of the process. The idea that working at something is in and of itself a worthy thing, right?
We've talked a lot about like the negatives of AI, but are there any positive things an artist can do with it? Just to explore all of our options, is there anything that, yes, this is good for research or it's good for trying to discover something? Playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. And I'm going to try to address it from what I've seen and from my perspective as both an educator and as a writer. So one of the problems with using AI for your research is what I just talked about earlier, those hallucinations. It'll make up stuff. So you have to be very careful. Any expert in any field, any true expert in any field will tell you that if you use AI to help you with your research, you better check on that. You cannot accept what an AI tells you at face value. And any educator in any field will tell you that the AI answers you get on Google, for example, when you Google something and it gives you this AI thing, it's inaccurate. It's inaccurate a lot of the time. And any professor will tell you that we have had students in the last couple of years, we're in the middle of class and we're talking about something and the student Googles it and says, oh no, this is what Google says. See, this is this. And we're like, no, that's inaccurate. Any educator will tell you this, that it is inaccurate much of the time. So I would caution anyone who wants to use AI, for anything that has any like basis in fact, or, I wouldn't trust it. I really wouldn't, based on what I've seen from my field. The AI is incredibly inaccurate and not very good. In many times when I see a literary analysis performed by an AI, it often misses the point. It often misses some of the most important things in the story or in the poem or what have you. It's not very good at it still. It's good at BSing, but it's not very good at, so, it's just not a reliable thing. So I would caution anyone from that respect. Now, from the idea of creative writing, some people might say, I like to have my AI give me ideas or help me world build or what have you. And for me personally, I would never do that. I just don't want it to be part of anything I do, because I've enjoyed all those things on my own. And I feel like it's my creativity that I'm improving when I'm working on things like that, when I'm trying to, world build, and when I look up things as well. Again, we'll get back to the factual stuff. So even as a creative writer, I had to find out how far can you sail in a day on a Viking ship, right? Or something like that. And I would not trust an AI to give me a correct answer there. I would have to actually do my homework. But guess what? I also really enjoyed learning about Viking ships. I enjoyed doing the research and learning. That's another great thing about writing, right? And you rip yourself off again if you have an AI do that for you. You're not going to retain that stuff, right? You're not going to digest it as deeply if you just have an AI spew out something and you can't really trust that it's accurate. So it just doesn't seem worth it to me. If you have to research to make sure the AI is accurate, why don't you just research in the first place, right?
Yeah. How much time are you really saving yourself?
Yeah, unless you don't mind being lied to or BS'd by the AI.
That is terrifying. In response to AI being in creative fields, what do you think communities like booktubers, like the writing groups that are all over the internet, what role should we play in advocating for human-centric artistry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we have to continue to champion human-created art. And, when we see a wonderful cover, I got this arc from Mark Lawrence's latest book here. I love this cover so much. Isn't that something? That's a human who did that, right? It's an artist who did. I wish I could remember his name. The same one who did the art for the Library trilogy, I believe. But anyway,
I thought the art style looked familiar.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I wish I could remember his name, but I don't think it's right here on the back either. But yeah, that we show off our books and say, look at this beautiful cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we remember the name of the artist.
Yeah.
So we out them out, and we celebrate great writing and the originality of great writing. Right now, I don't think an AI could do what Stephen Erickson does, or what Guy Gabriel Kay does, or Jenny Wirtz, or Robin Hobb. I don't think an AI could do those. So we celebrate that the spirit of humanity that's in that art. That's what we're missing when an AI spews that stuff out. There's no spirit of humanity there. It's an imitation. That's all it can ever be, actually. Even as great as it could get better and better and better at it, but it's always going to be an imitation. From what I've seen too, by the way, the AI stories that are being made, that are out there, they're pretty much the same 5 or 6 stories, just recycled again and again and again, So
it's that slop that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Drawing from your background as a medievalist, are there any historical parallels to AI disrupting like writing and art, like the printing press? And how can modern writers really adapt to that similarity?
Yeah, so from my perspective, the printing press was revolutionary. You cannot overemphasize how important the printing press was in terms of the human story, because that was a means by which knowledge suddenly became much more widely available, because books became a lot cheaper. In comparison to that, though, the internet became an even bigger means of dispersing information and, unfortunately, disinformation. Because as wonderful as these are tools, once again, which can be used to better people, and they can be abused, unfortunately. And I think with AI, once again, this another step along this path. The AI feels in some ways a little different to me, but I think that it is a tool, which we started out saying. It's a tool that can be used for good things, and your field, you've seen it, and I know that it's doing good things in other realms as well. But it's also a tool that is being much abused right now. And instead of information, as we've been talking about with all these hallucinations and everything else, it's dispersing a lot of disinformation. The AI is. There are a lot of fake videos now. It's a little frightening to me, all the fake videos that are being put out there. And of course, they're getting better and better. There used to be very telltale signs, of that, oh, that's AI, so I shouldn't trust it. But those are getting harder just to pick out, aren't they? Which, it's not a good thing. Especially, I actually feel there should be a label on anything that was created with AI. Whether it be a book or art or a video or anything, because unfortunately, people can use those things for pretty sinister purposes. You're being dishonest if you're putting something out there and you're not telling people, oh, this is AI. You're being dishonest from the get-go.
That actually dovetails very well into my final question for this interview. What ethical guidelines would you suggest for writers who are considering AI assistance in their work, or how the industry as a whole should react to ensure fair practice?
That's a really important question, and I probably wouldn't have all the answers yet, but and from a personal perspective, I don't want it anywhere near me. I don't want to use it for anything, honestly. But I feel, as we said earlier, that if we're going to be defending human creativity in one realm, we ought to be consistent. I really feel very strongly that we should say, okay, I don't want to consume AI writing, so therefore I should be consistent and not consume AI art and AI music. Because why is writing more important than music? Why is writing more important than art? Is it just because that happens to be your medium? So I think you have to be, a little bit empathetic toward artists and musicians and even cover designers and narrators and so on and so on. So I think consistency there is important. And that's how I feel. Within those fields, how far you can go with your AI, if you're someone who is comfortable using it, I don't know. I really don't know. Is it okay to have an AI suggest ideas to you if you feel stuck? I don't get to be the decider or it's use your conscience, I suppose. Use your conscience. If you feel that there's no problem with that, I'm not going to argue with you. Just for me personally, though, I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't use it because, again, I want to develop my ability to brainstorm. I want to develop my ability to world build. I want to learn while I'm doing my research, and I won't do any of those things if I lean on an AI to do those things for me. So those are all parts of this journey of being a writer for me. And I also treasure the relationships that I form with other creative people, the artists, the narrators. And I would hate to not have that as part of this journey as well.
Philip, well said. Could you tell the people, one, where can they find you, and two, where can they find your books?
They can find me here on YouTube, Philip Chase. I'm on the other social media like Blue Sky and X and Instagram as Philip Chase 90. And my books, the Adan trilogy and While Darkness Gathers, are available on Amazon for the ebook, for the physical book. Any online bookseller will do. And the audiobook is also available for the trilogy. And then we have the special edition from the Broken Binding. You'd have to buy that exclusively from the Broken Binding press edition. So yeah, and that's it. I think I covered it all.
I think that's everything. And we'll have all that linked down below. So, Philip, thank you so much for coming on to the show this evening.
It's a pleasure, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. Have a good night.
Yay, we did it.